Let's learn a Bissel Tanya, okay? A Bissel Tanya. Now we're holding on page 22, Yudalf mit Beis. Now let's a little bit introduce the Inyan, okay? The Alter Rebbe started talking about Klippe. Alter Rebbe started talking about Klippe a long time ago, because we have a great way of making things last. The Alter Rebbe started talking about Klippe. And he said, what is Klippe? Not bittul. Klippe is not bittul. That's all. Klippe is not bad and angry and spiteful. Klippe is just not bittul. But then he developed that there's a lot of madregis in Klippe. There's higher madregis in Klippe. There's lower madregis in Klippe. There's Klippe in the highest world, there's Klippe in the lower world, and there's Klippe down here in this world, the lowest of worlds. So the Rebbe says that in this, the lowest of worlds, there's two madregis of Klippe. There's a lower madrega of Klippe called Klippe is Tmeis Verois Lagamri. Klippe is Tmeis Verois Lagamri. Klippe that is very tame and that is very evil, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later more also. And then you have something called Klippas Noiga. Klippas Noiga. Klippas Noiga is a lesser severe klippe. What is the nature of Klippas Noiga? The nature of Klippas Noiga is there's like a peel, it's like a shell, and underneath the peel or underneath the shell there is a light. And if you peel it off, if you take off the shell, you'll extract the light. In the other klippas Tmeis or Lois Lagamri, if you peel off the peel or you crack open the shell, you find another layer, and another layer. It never finishes. Klippas Noiga, if you remove the peel or the shell, you'll find a light. So the Alter Rebbe says, when it comes to Klippas Noiga, Kavona makes a difference. That's the word. Kavona changes it. Intent determines what it is. Shar klippas atmeis lagamri, v'rois lagamri, other klippas, intention doesn't change anything. You'll see later some very strong words about this. But klippas noiga, intention affected. Okay, what's klippas noiga? The nefesh abahamis abiyid is klippas noiga. What's klippas noiga? Lahav lagoy. Who's mekayim the sheva mitzvahs b'nei noyach, it's klippas noiga. What else is klippas noiga? Kosher food, whether it's from animals or if it's from plants or it's from minerals. All things in this world are in the category of klippas noiga. So now the Rebbe says kavana determines what it is. Okay? If a person does it l'shem shamayim, a person partakes of physical things in this world for the sake of heaven, that it's going to help them serve the Eibishter better, and he uses it to lift him up. Now the Rebbe gives some very interesting examples. But people who say that in order to understand Torah, I need to have Archavas Hadas. And those who have Archavas Hadas start to eat fatty meat and drink tasty wine. Or like the example that I mentioned to you, that the Rabbi Tam used to keep money on his table. The Rabbi Tam used to keep gold coins on his table, and it would help with Archavas Hadas. And again, all this I told you last week, the Rebbe said about a certain Yid who gave him tzedakah. The Rebbe said, our Rebbe said, about a Yid who gave him tzedakah, that it gave him Archavas Hadas and leave with that tape. Could you imagine? A Yid gave the Rebbe money to tzedakah with such a fanem, in such a amount, that the Rebbe said it opened up his mind, klayachol, in the Inyan of Teirah. You versteht die Sache. So when a person uses material things, physical things, that are kosher, and they're l'shem shamayim, using them to serve the Eibishter, and he's thinking about serving the Eibishter. Like I told you last week, the two versions of the story of an ox and a shtreimel. I told you the way the Rebbe told it, and the way it says in Yivcha Baal Shem Tov. Depends on the kavanah. Yeah, but if a person uses the physical world, this kavanah to serve their Eibishter, it becomes Kiddush. And of course, this is a very subjective thing. You know, one person's the Shem Shamayim is another person's who knows what. In other words, sometimes it looks to you like a person is involved in the lowest and the worst things, and this is the Ratzon Elyon. This is what the Eibishter wants. What the Eibishter wants. I'll tell you a story. I don't know why I'm telling you the story, but I'm telling you so because I want to tell you the story. Yeah, I have a friend. His name is Penny in Jersey. I grew up with him. He lived one block further east. He lived near Utica. We lived near Schenectady. So we were both in a different part of Crown Heights. In those days, you didn't walk by Albany Avenue unless you had an armed guard. But we lived over there. And we were friends growing up. He's between me and my brother in age. Mamish my age. Nobody would have called him a Chassidish Abachar. He wasn't. He was in yeshiva. He loved the Jets and the Mets and whatever other. He was very involved in his sports. He's a lebendige, freiliche Chevraman. Anyway, he was in Florida on Shlichus as a bocher. And he came to the powers that were and said there's going to be a Miami Dolphins football game and we have to make a Hanukkah lighting. A menorah by the football field in Miami Dolphins Stadium. So I don't know the Prati Asipur. The Toichan Asipur was that everyone was afraid. And he put his neck out and he told to the Rebbe and the Rebbe proved. And he came here by Fabrengen. I remember him coming here by Fabrengen, but I don't remember the Rebbe's mom. My brother told me. He got up, I don't know if you know Penny. If you know Penny, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know Penny. He got up and he announced that kickoff is going to be kach v'kach, and at halftime there's going to be the Menei kach v'kach. He said it like as if he was in his living room talking to his father. You understand? With the ganze break with the whole delight, and the Rebbe was smiling ear to ear. The Rebbe got such nachas from it. At the time, it seemed weird that a boy from yeshiva should have such a koch in the Jets. I'm sorry, in the Miami Dolphins. But the Rebbe got such nachas from it. The end of the story was this guy got married. And he started a business. This is now talking Nun Aleph, 1991. The Rebbe did not send shluchim since the 1960s. You know, the Rebbe's shluchim since then were called shliach shliach, more or less. There were exceptions. There were shluchim the Rebbe sent personally, but azoy shliach shliach. He got married. He started a business, and he wrote to the Rebbe, and he gets an answer from the Rebbe. Why not shlichus? So he gave his business to his brother, and he moved to Florida and became a shliach. He gave his business to his brother. He moved to the shliach. Now, I don't know what the Aselin is. I don't know what the Rebbe's Kavanah is. But what another person will look at and say, fair, a Hanukkah Meneh by a football game, the Rebbe says, no, oh, don't see this. You need the right kind of person to get up in Joe Rabbi Stadium and light the Meneh with the ganzen Nispashtas. But that's the Kavanah. No, the Kavanah is the Shem Shamayim, it becomes Kiddush. Another person says, that's holy. And he enjoys it. I guarantee he enjoys it. But he's doing the Rebbe's work. He's doing the Rebbe's work. Anyways, getting back to the Tanya. Klipas Negev, the Kavon of the Shem Shamayim, you raise it up. And it's a very subjective thing. It really is. You know, in ein Welt, what you think is the greatest Grobkeit, in a different Welt is the biggest mitzvah. And vice versa. What in one world is a very appropriate thing, in a different world, past is takanish. You know, not everybody has to go to a football game because the Rebbe gave an ishur to light the Meneh by a football game. But if you have to, then it becomes an aliyah l'shem shemayim. This is called klipas nega. Klipas nega, the kavanah, the shem shemayim, you raise it up. What happens if you partake of klipas nega and you have no kavanah? You have neither a kavanah like this, nor a kavanah like this, so then it remains what it was. It was klipas nega before you took of it. It remains klipas nega after you partook of it. Lo yadifi ma'ase dibur elu b'chov elu ma'ase min nefesh v'hames hachayunis ba'atzma. When you use the material world for health, for parnasa, for all the good things that a person needs, and he's not thinking one thought or another, it remains where it was. And now we continue to read inside. On the other hand, mishahu b'zeila leibosa v'seveyayim. A person who's a glutton is a baltaibe. Frest und säuft. These are Yiddish words from the ancient past, from the 19th century. Zeil leibasa means he eats meat, not because he needs it, but because he enjoys it to the extent that it's called excessive. V'seve yayin, and he's involved in drinking of wine, again to the extent that it's excessive. And his only kavanah is the malis taives gufe v'nefesh habamis, to satisfy the desires of his body and his animal soul. Shehu bechinas yeseid amayim, which is the element of water. Me'arba yeseid saroyim shabaf, from the four evil elements. Shemimenu midas hatayva, from which comes the midah, the measure of desire, like we discussed in the first Perek of Tanya, that there are four midas, four yeseid saroyim, which are the source of all midas saroyim. So his intention is entirely to satisfy. It's 100% kosher. There's nothing, it's glad, kosher, and it's 212, it's mahadrin, mina mahadrin. But his whole mitzvah is like the Rebbe's expression, an ox and a streimel. Emphasis not on streimel, but on ox. So the Rebbe says, hine, ayedezeh, through this, yedit, chayes, abosav, ayayin, shebekirbe, the life which is in this meat and in this wine, which is now giving him life, because when you eat food and you're healthy, the food is broken down, and nasas dama bosak becomes your flesh and your blood. V'nichlal, and it becomes included. Lefishah, temporarily, beragomah, in real evil. And real evil means it's uncorrectable. Shabisholosh klipes atmeis, of the three severe klipes. Gufei nasa lehen levushim akav, one person's body who indulges in pleasure just for the sake of it becomes a garment and a chariot. Lefishah, temporarily. So here's the point. When the kavana is l'shem taiva, I'm involving myself in materialism, and there's no avodas Hashem. By the way, I'll tell you, Hashem chassid shemaiseh. There was a yid, a gvir, a chosid, a big chosid. He was wealthy, and he came to his Rebbe. I don't know which one of the Rabbeim.
It's still here.
And he asked his Rebbe what he should eat. What he should eat every day. He can afford anything he wants. But he was a chassid, so he wanted to know from his Rebbe what has a lesson. So the Rebbe told him, you should eat every single day fleish mit weiße bread. You should eat the best meat and the best bread. In those days, white bread was considered a luxury. Today it's considered poor man's food. As the world changes, you should eat everyday meat and bread. So he told the Rebbe, was mit das Kaffee? So the Rebbe said, if you'll eat meat and the best bread, the poor people in town will have chicken. But if you're going to eat every day, ich weiß nicht was, boxer, like a Shimon Ben Yochai in the cave, the poor people are going to have nothing to eat. In other words, your role in this world is to be mefanis others, and you have to have a hasaga to be mefanis. If you're depriving yourself, if your life is a life of iskafia, so how do you look at another guy? You should also do iskafia. The Rebbe says your avoid is to enjoy Elam Hazeh, so that you should have an appreciation to give to somebody else. That's also called l'shem shamayim. Anyway. But if a person doesn't do l'shem taiva, the Rebbe said that he goes down into klip. But he says twice the expression lefishah, temporarily. Mutter is not asr. Something is kosher, it's not treif. And kavona doesn't change that. If something is mutter apiteh, you'll see soon that the Rebbe is going to translate the word mutter, and he's going to translate the word isir in a very logical and understandable way. If something is kosher, is permitted, it's not naveda. Indulging in it is shameful. It's not an aveda, but it's shameful. Like the famous expression from the Ramban, which I've repeated a number of times, novel b'reshus ha'Torah. You're called the reshus ha'Torah. Everything I do, I have the Torah's permission. I'm very, very frum. But the Torah who gives me permission to live the life I live calls me a menuvel. Menuvel means abominable, disgusting. If I'm doing something with reshus ha'Torah, what makes me novel? And the answer is because the kavana is not at all as a mensch. The kavana is not at all in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's mutter, it's reshus ha'Torah. But honorable it's not. Honorable it's not. If you want to use the Shulchan Aruch to your advantage, there's a lot of things you can do to bend and twist the Shulchan Aruch to make it serve you. And as they would say in our culture, so you have the letter of the law and you don't have the spirit of the law. If you're keeping the halachas technically, you never do an aveda. But every heter and every kula and every expression, was men meg darf men, was men tarnish darf men gefinnen a heter, right? If I'm allowed, I must enjoy it. And if I'm not allowed, I go to the right Rov and I get the right heter and I do it this way, this way, this way. It's mutter, kosher. So in halacha, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's called nivel. It's not appropriate. That's not what a yid is. A yid doesn't keep halachas ateda like a scorecard. A yid lives the life of a yid. There's a tara, there's a kedusha, there's a day and a chayna, there's midas tevis, as opposed to how many corners I can cut. But the Alter Rebbe says even a person who doesn't do that, a person whose philosophy is if it's mutter, I'm going to have 2, and if it's kosher, I'm going to have 5. Why shouldn't I enjoy it? It's mutter and kosher and so on. So the Alter Rebbe says it's yedid, it's klipa, not good. But lefishah. Lefishah means it. Something kosher doesn't become an aveda because I enjoy it. Something kosher makes me an aveda because I enjoy it. And I can always fix it. Let's keep on reading. So the Rebbe continues. Ad, until, last 2 lines, last line on page Yud Aleph on the base, Asher Yoshev Ha'adam, the person will return. And of course, you could technically translate the word Yoshev to do tshuva. But he's not doing tshuva for an aveda. He's doing tshuva for being distracted, being distant from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'yachser la'avedes havayer l'tirasa, in return to be one who's a servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and who's engaged in his Torah. And Alter Rebbe explains, key. Now we're on top of the next page, which is Beis Amar Aleph, page 23. The fish beside the head of yain kosher. The meat is mutter, and the wine is kosher. So to become stuck in klipa doesn't happen. It just becomes that you're wallowing in it. You're trapped in it. You can return and you can raise it up. The shuva, when you return, is when you do a tshuva to be re-engaged like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, la'avedas havayah, to serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I want to explain something to you, which is a little bit nigeh, more than we get to the pashas that we had last week. We had Tzav, and before that we had Vayikra. The din is, when a person doesn't have Aveda, he brings a carbon. Right? And of course, bringing a carbon, because you do an Aveda, there's all kinds of rules and stipulations and nuances. It's not so simple. Not for every Aveda. Can you bring a carbon? You have to know what carbon you bring for what Aveda, and so on. But one of the ideas that you have in Tate is this: that if a person does an Aveda, and he has to bring a carbon chatos or a carbon noshon, which is a sin offering. There's a difference in a chatos and a noshon, which may actually complicate what I'm saying, but let's not go into those details. He didn't have a carbon chatos. So it says in Chazal that the minig was that if a person did an Aveda and he brought a carbon chatos, after he brought the carbon chatos, he would bring a carbon oil, an offering which was consumed by the Mizbeach entirely. Certain karbanes will lechatchila chatas and an oil. You know that some karbanes, some Avedas, the chatas and oil came automatically. It was required. But most Avedas didn't Aveda b'shei, you in carbon chatas and you're forgiven. It's called kapara. After you bring the carbon chatas, you bring a carbon oil. That's number one. And number two, if a person was mevatel an asay, a person missed the mitzvah. A person missed, he didn't do anything wrong. He just missed an opportunity to do something right. So it's not a chiyuv, it's not an obligation, it's not required, but the minig was that you would bring an oilah. If a person missed a mitzvah, he brought a carbon, and there's a whole shaila. If he did an aveda, we did 5 avedas, let's say, he has to bring 5 chatois for 5 avedas. The shaila is, if you do the same aveda 5 times, you need 5 chatois or 5 different avedas. We did more than one aveda, we did more than one carbon chatos. But when you bring a carbon oilah, the question becomes maybe one oilah can go for all the avedas, or one oilah can go for all the bittul of mitzvahs asay. But there was a tradition. There are 2 things. Number one, if you didn't have aveda, you brought a carbon chatos, afterwards you brought an adovah, you volunteered. It's not required. You volunteered to bring a carbon oilah. And if you're mevatel a mitzvahs asay, if you missed an opportunity to do a positive mitzvah, you also brought a carbon oilah. This is not required offerings, it was a custom. This is what Yidden did. The times of the Beis HaMikdash. Alter Rebbe talks about Tanya. And he gets that shub. He discusses this. And Alter Rebbe says a fantastic thing, and it's so axiomatic. It's so religious. It's so chassidish, but it's not only chassidus. It's Yiddishkeit. It's so basic to being a religious person. The Alter Rebbe says any time a person does a sin, he's doing 2 sins. Number one, he's not thinking about God. And number 2, he's doing something God said not to do. Now, which is worse? To stop thinking about the Eibishter, or to do something Hashem said not to do? Now, psychologically, spiritually, philosophically, stopping to think about Hashem, to stop paying attention to the Eibishter is terrible. And to be sure, if you continue to pay attention to the Eibishter, you don't do an Aveda in the first place. The beginning of every Aveda is a lack of attentiveness. But you can't get punished for not thinking about the Eibishter, because punishments apply for things you did, not for things you didn't do. Punishments apply for actions, not for a certain mental state or a lack thereof. There's no punishment for not tuning into HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not good. It's the source of every Aveda. We can be punished for it. Yeah? But any time a person does something wrong, there are these 2 dimensions. The first thing that happens is you turn away from Hashem. If you're thinking about the Eibishter, you don't do this. The basis for doing this is you're turning away from the Eibishter. After you turn away from the Eibishter, then you can fall to a point where you can do something Hashem said not to do. So the Alter Rebbe says, therefore, tshuva has 2 parts. When a person is doing tshuva, they're correcting a wrong. But in addition to correcting a wrong, they're correcting their own mind. The idea that you can be a religious Jew and have no relationship with the Eibishter is a sin. It's a sin which is the source of all sins. No one can hold you accountable. You can be punished for it. But it's nevala. It's low. It's shameful. That's not a yid. A yid is somebody who's involved with the Eibishter. A person's involved with the Eibishter, they're first of all much less likely of making a mistake. And when they make a mistake, it bothers them very, very, very much. So the tshuva process involves two things. Number one, you fix what you did wrong. And number two, you fix the mental conditioning or lack thereof of self, which put you in this place where you could fall. So every time you brought a chatas, brought an ayla. The Alter Rebbe uses the expression from the Gemara that this is called praklit and this is called doira. And praklit means in English an advocate, a lawyer. You have a problem with a judge, you don't come by yourself, you come with a lawyer because the lawyer knows how to Tanya, he knows what the arguments are, knows the rules and the loopholes and all the heterim, and he comes and he argues on your behalf and he discredits the witnesses and he gets you what they call it, not guilty. Not guilty and innocent are very, very far apart. Can you do it before? Yes? So that's the lawyer. But the lawyer just gets you off, you shouldn't be punished. But you want to have a relationship with this judge. You don't want to just say, don't punish me. You don't develop a relationship with a judge who you dissed because you got off without a punishment. Because not guilty is not the same thing as innocent. So you bring him a gift. It's called a doira, an offering. And you're not bringing this offering so he shouldn't punish you. You're bringing an offering to renew your bond, to renew relationship. This is called in the Lashon HaKabbalah Tshuvah Elah. That's what Tshuvah Elah means. Tshuvah Torah means I fix what I did wrong. Tshuvah Elah, I fix my engagedness or lack thereof with Hashem. I'm supposed to be involved with the Eibishter. I'm not involved with the Eibishter. I'm involved in Nanishkeit. And Tshuvah Elah is the need to be re-involved with Hashem. So when you did an Aveda, you brought a Chatos, which was like kapara. It cleans the Aveda off. And then you brought an Oila to renew your bonding with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you will mavatla mitzvah saseh, if you missed an opportunity to do a positive mitzvah, where there's no punishment at all, you missed a mitzvah, there's no punishment. You missed a mitzvah, there's no karma. But you missed a mitzvah because there was a certain element of laxness, there was a certain element of a lack of attentiveness. You fix it through a cardinal. So when a person is engaging what we're describing here, but he's living a life, you know, the Rebbe Marash used to say, Stovas is past, or the Dovas is past nicht. You know, the Rebbe Marash used to say this, it's in the Kutah Deburim. Things that are appropriate and things that are inappropriate. And the opposite of this is past, when it's past nit, is a letter from the Friedrich Rebbe, and I'll tell you the whole story already. What's the Maise? The Rebbe gave out the Kuntzei Tzachayim. I don't know if you remember. Tafshin enough, 1990 to 91, it was still 1990. Tafshin enough, the Rebbe gave us the Kuntzei Tzachayim. It was a yellow, I'm very bad with identifying colors. I didn't go to kindergarten, which is really true. It's a beige or a maroon or a brown or a yellow. It's one of those colors, not a maroon. Huh? It's yellow. It's a brownish yellow. And the Rebbe Kuntzei Tzachayim. And I had a just great revelation, you know. God came to me and spoke to me. And he said to me, if the Rebbe gives you something, maybe you should actually learn it. Yeah? So everything the Rebbe gave out, I used to try and learn. The Rebbe gave us the Tanya, had one Tanya cover to cover, then 9 months later he gave us another one. So it became a little difficult. But the Rebbe gave out Sfarim. I remember, I told you this once, I was sitting in Marstown by the Melech, Membeis, when the Rebbe gave out Tanya's on his 80th birthday. And it was after Pesach. And he sat down with us, there's new house, your new Tanya. It's nice, yeah, it's sitting on the shelf, it's crisp. It still has the glue and the binding on the top. But the Rebbe gave you a book to put on a shelf. Now you have to tear it up. He said, how many paraprakim of the Tanya? And I remember how that went into my head. I was a little boy, I was 16. But it moved me. Anyway, the Rebbe gave a Kuntzei Tzachayim. I learned it. In the beginning of Kuntzei Tzachayim is a letter, which begins b'mayin al mechtovcha, in response to your writing. It wasn't written to anybody in particular. The Friedrich Rebbe wrote in Perkesdorf. Perkesdorf was a kurort, that there was a resort area near Vienna, which is Austria. And they used to call it Yerushalayim d'Europa, they called it. Perkesdorf was called the Yerushalayim, talking before the Second World War, the Jerusalem of Europe, because all the Rosh Yeshiva, all the Gedolei Yisrael went there in the summer for relaxation. Whether they came from Litakia, whether they came from Galicia, or they came from whatever it was, Poland. And if the Rosh Yeshivas went, if the Gedolim went, the Talmidim went. So Perkesdorf in the summertime was literally a vad of Chachomim. You had thousands of Yeshiva Bachrim, Talmidei Chachomim, B'nai Torah, and their Rosh Yeshivas. The Friedrich Rebbe used to go to Perkesdorf The Munkach Rebbe was in Perkesdorf. The Rogatchover was in Perkesdorf. It was the place to be. So the Frierdiker was in Perkesdorf, and the Frierdiker wrote a letter. And he gave this letter, I'll tell you about the letter momentarily. He gave this letter to Rav Zalman Geradi Olav Shalom, who was an elder Bocher. Zalman got very, very late. And he told him he should be mefarsim the letter, should publicize the letter. So Rav Zalman Geradi says to our Rebbe, who was then the B'chasna de Bein the Rebbe Frierdiker, his son-in-law, how am I supposed to mefarsim a letter like this in Perkesdorf? He says, I think he told him to take a bunch of copies, but I'm not even sure about that. Took a bunch of copies, sit in a very public place on a bench and read. And anybody who asks, hand them a copy. Or show them the letter. So he did that, and in no time at all, the whole Perkesdorf was talking about this letter. I'll tell you soon the Teichen HaMichtav, so you'll understand why. He walked in to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said, Zalman was Herzchen gas. What's going on outside? So the Zalman Geradi told the Frierdiker Rebbe what he already know. As brennt a fire. The Frierdiker Rebbe lit a fire. Wow, it was terrible. He wrote the worst kind of letter you could have possibly written for that time and that place. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said very casually, very gleichgültig, "Nu, nem Wasser and lesh. Take water, put the fire out." What was the Teichen of this letter the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote? The Teichen letter the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote, it's a letter about Midas HaIshtavus. Midas HaIshtavus. The shadish of the word Ishtavus is Shover. Everything is the same. Now you have in Sifrei Musar, Midas HaIshtavus, the highest Madreg. Shivisi Avaya Lenegdi Summit. Right, Shivisi. It's the text of Baal Shem Tov. Shivisi, everything in my life is equal. When something good happens, something bad happens, it's exactly the same. Because Hashem Lenegdi Summit. Because the Eibush is next to me all the time. It says about David HaMelech. It says in Sifrei Musar, it says in Shalom. David HaMelech's midah was midas ha'ishtavus. That means to say, when David HaMelech says, Shivisi Hashem Lenegdi Sami, and then you can read Kapitel Tazayin, how he describes what that brings to him. David HaMelech got good, David HaMelech got bad, it was all the same. It's a very high madreg, you know. Something good happens and you say thank you. And something bad happens and you say the same thank you, that's called midas ha'ishtavus, L'mal Yusuf. But the Frierdiker Rebbe used it like this. He said, Midas HaShtavus means everybody is equal. What's everybody is equal? People forgot the idea that some people carry greater responsibility than others. He said, Yeshiva Bachar is not a balabos. Balabos can be the biggest lamb. But Yeshiva Bachar has to dress different and act different and talk different and walk different. He says, today you have this neutralization. Alles an gleich. You can be the biggest lamb, and you know, you don't walk around in denim. You know, you walk around in denim because you can't pay any other pants. Tell you lecha bracha. But you walk around in denim because you don't honor yourself. It's a chilul Hashem. The halachas of chilul Hashem also, the Rambam brings it, are subjective. A chilul Hashem for one person is not a chilul Hashem for another person. And the Frierdiker Rebbe laments the idea that people stop appreciating their place in this society and the responsibility that brings with it. But what's so unusual about this letter is the Frierdiker Rebbe goes on this huge discussion about the miles of Lite, what we call Misnag, and their appreciation for Teira and B'nai Teira. Lite, Lithuania. And the Rebbe talks about how it used to be hundreds of years before, how in the small Shetalach they had a yeshiva, and the Bacham would get and tag. The Bacham didn't have a place to eat. So every family got a Bachar one day a week. So in the mishpachas, they were called Ich bin a Sonntag dike, Ich bin a Montag dike, Ich bin a Dienstag. In other words, they would say 10 bachim in yeshiva. So there were 70 families. Every family got one bacha one day a week. And that mishpacha, the day that the bacha came by them to eat was by them Shabbos. They would eat the best food. He describes the yakros that there was for a person who's sitting and learning Torah, Ben Torah. And the Rebbe laments this loss. Imagine a Hasidic Rebbe writing a letter like that then. I mean, even today perhaps, but it was such a bold thing to do in the middle of the heart of Hasidus, in the golden age of Hasidus, to say, "Excuse me, you know, we're not all the same." You understand? So that's what we talk. When you're talking about klipas nega, and you're talking about enjoying life, there's something very subjective about it. There's not one size fits all. There's a midas ha'ishtavus. Every person's in a different place, and what is for one a mitzvah is for one the opposite of a mitzvah. What's the tzad hashavish behem? That you're paying attention to the Eibishter. And if you're so engrossed If you're so immersed in the pleasures of this world, as the expression is that you're in the bechina of an ox in a streimel, but not the emphasis on streimel, the emphasis on ox, you have to do tshuva. But you could do tshuva. Because in Aveda it's not. It doesn't entrap you. It doesn't get you stuck in klipa. But it's nitazeh fitz chayid. And this is really the struggle of life. This is really the struggle of, this is the challenge of America. In an unprecedented way. We have so much opportunity, Baruch Hashem. We have so much wealth. And it's so easy to access. And you think, so what? I'll enjoy another type. I'll enjoy another type. Every single material indulgence that we bring into our lives has a spiritual cost. It's a fact of life. The richer you are, the bigger chassid you have to be. That's how it goes. Why? Because materialism weighs one down. It doesn't have to be sinful. It has to be distracting. And when a person is so distracted by it, he forgets about the Meibishter. So besides for the Aveda, in this case there's no Aveda, you have to bring a Kod Mo'ilom, which means I need to renew my bond with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not because I did anything wrong, but I lost my way. You understand? That's what the Alter Rebbe is describing here. That Dvarim HaMutarim, permitted taivis, when we allow us to be caught up in it, it schleps us down into Klip, and you got to fix it. And what's fix it? To turn around and use the material things we possess in our lives for Avedis Hashem. I remember as a kid reading a story. It was called Der Spiegel. I'm sorry, I'm telling you stories from Talks and Tales, but this is my guess at the Yankee said. In my first reading, I didn't know how to read English, I read Yiddish. I didn't know Hebrew either, which is another story, but I knew Yiddish. Der Spiegel, the mirror. What's the story about the Spiegel? There was a Yid, a Yeshiva Bacher, who was a very poor boy, a very big battler, he had nothing and so on. Anyway, he did something wonderful. He had Mesiras Nefesh for tzedakah, some Maaseh, and his Rebbe gave him a bracha for Ashiris. His Rebbe, I think the story was that money disappeared from his Rebbe's house. Money disappeared from his Rebbe's house. And his Rebbe knew that it wasn't shaykh that he took it. But the money was gone. So he came to this Talmud's house and he apologized profusely. And said, money disappeared from my house. I really don't suspect that you took the money. But I need to ask you, did you take the money? So he broke down and he confessed and he gave him the money back. Anyway, after Pesach, he found out by B'dikas Chometz that he was missing the money. After Pesach, the person whose money it was came to the Rav to collect it, and the Rav gave him the money. The real Ganef, the actual Ganef, saw this, and he couldn't understand. Where did the Rav get the money from? He had to give it. He knew he stole it. So he started doing inquiries, and he found out that this Talmud admitted to having taken the money, which he hadn't taken. So he goes away to this Talmud and says, listen, Beini leBeincha, I'm the Ganef. He was very poor. He was very poor. He didn't have the money. You have to take the money back from me. He says, I don't face the dress. In Gemara, you have Lav Bal Devorim Didi At. Lav Bal Din, I forgot the last Gemara. Lav Bal, I have no business with you. I never took anything from you, and I owe you nothing. So it became a whole tzia, a whole situation. So the Ganef went back to the Rav and says, I need to tell you something. I stole the money, and your poor Talmud gave it out of his own pocket. And I'm not comfortable confessing, but please beg him that he should take the money back. Anyway, the Rav gave this Yid a bracha for Ashiris. He became very rich. But as he became richer, he became more and more self-absorbed. In the beginning, when an Oni came into the house, he would bring him into his house, he would feed him himself. And then he had people doing it. And then it became all kinds of rules. But it got to a point where he was so self-absorbed, he wouldn't let you into his house because you're going to muddy his floors, you understand? And he'd give you a matbeya with the ayin sarah, and his whole midas tevis turned ugly.
So
the Talmud. So the Rebbe came to visit him. And when the Talmud is, the Rebbe is coming, he prepared for him a bayar l'shalom and a big su'udi in Valadol City, and he moved him into his house and he gave him the ganze covet. And the Rav asks his Talmud to give him a tour of his mansion that he lived in. And they go into the bed. Everything is first class. It's the best in the Shenste. And they're looking out the window. He says, who's this? who's this? And he points at some very, very downtrodden. How is he? He's not doing so good. Then he goes over to the mirror, which was a big, beautiful mirror. He says, who's this? He says, who's this? This is me. This is you. He says, what's this made out of glass? What's this made out of glass? How come in this glass I see only myself, in that glass I see another? He says, Rebbe, you don't understand, because behind this glass, they smeared onto the back a layer of silver, so it becomes reflective, and you see yourself. So the Rebbe says to himself, rhetorically, I see. So when you put silver on the back of the glass, you stop seeing others and you see only yourself. And he got the message. Hat er sich eingebeten. He said to his Rebbe, I'll do tshuva. And he did tshuva. He went back to his old ways, and he took a blade, and he scraped off the silver from one corner of his mirror, that he should always remember that even though you have silver behind the glass, you should see another. And it's just a beautiful story. Yeah? It's a shein and maise. But this is the nesoyin. This is the nesoyin in so many aspects of our lives. So the Alter Rebbe says that if a person is involved in Gashmis, mutter, kosher, permitted, allowed, it's a good hechsher, the best hechsher. I only eat chassidish shchita and so on, all the rest of the chumris. You're so busy with yourself that there's no time for another person, there's no time for the Eibishter. It's klipa, lefisha. Until you fix it, but you can fix it. And now the Rebbe continues. Shezehu Loshen. I'm sorry. Shezehu Loshen Heter Umuter. That is the meaning of the words Heter Umuter, untied and permitted. I want to borrow your Tanya, please, if that's okay. Yeah, okay. Here, I'm taking this. You should put things into the Tanya. The Rebbe made a luach hatikun. The Rebbe made a correction in the Tanya, in the back. But the Rebbe instructed that they shouldn't put the corrections into the pnim. And they didn't listen to the Rebbe. So I'm going to read it the way it's printed here. I'm not going to read it the way it's printed here, okay? Klaima, this means, what is the meaning of the word heter? Permitted, mutter, allowed. She'eni kosher v'os. It's not tied down and it's not trapped. B'dei achitzayim, in the hands of klippas. Because if it were, she'layuchal lachzer v'laleis lasha, then it would not be able to return and to go up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So here the Alter Rebbe establishes a yesod. What is the meaning of the word heter? And what is the meaning of the word iser? Heter in English means allowed. Iser in English means prohibited. Because there's nothing attached to the word. Heter means untied, and iser means tied down. Heter means when you indulge in it, it doesn't entrap you. Iser means when you indulge in it, it locks you up, like a prison. The Hebrew word for a jail is ma'asad, is osir. So the Alter Rebbe says when something is kosher, it's very easily corrected, because it's not iser, it doesn't tie you down, it doesn't lock you down. We'll talk about that next time. It's heter. It's untied. And because it's untied, it's very easy to reverse. The basis of the reversal is that you have to be focused on Hashem. You're not doing, what you're doing isn't wrong. The way you're doing it is wrong. The preoccupation with it is wrong. The distractedness from the Meivish is wrong. You have the Hayem Yem. Reishes and Nefila. There's a few Hayem Yems that speak Bleich zum Herzen. Yeah, what's that Hayem Yem? Anybody remember? Reishes HaYerida Nachman Letzad. The beginning of someone's spiritual decline who had that Avodah B'Tfilah. He's just not davening with the same passion anymore. Now, if I don't daven, I'm doing wrong. If I daven with less kavanah, I daven with less hearts, I'm not doing anything wrong, but I'm CC to do something right. What is davening? Connected to the Meibish. If I stop connected to the Meibish, I'm still frum, I'm still an Elachayid, but the oilah, the spiritual attachedness to the Eibish becomes deficient, as Vert Alstruken and Kaut. And the consequence of that is that Yiddishkeit becomes dry and cold. It doesn't have any meaning. Why does it have any meaning? Why should I do mitzvahs if the mitzvah ha-mitzvahs is not important to me? The Eibishter is not something I'm engaged with because I stopped davening. Davening not in the sense of saying to the Eibishter, give me. But davening in the sense of attaching myself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so you keep your frum. The chayes is gone. The lebedekeit is gone. The mitzvahs anoshim milamon v'etinechfer. And the third level is that even doing mitzvahs mechanically, even doing mitzvahs without vitality and vibrancy, also becomes hard. It's hard to make Havdalah. It's hard to bench after you eat. Why? The beginning of it is that I'm not impassioned about Avodas Hashem. The second step is I do it on lebedekeit, and then I say this is not such a big deal. Men eilt, we're always in a rush. Men wird on them geschmack in Teda, there's no delight in Teda. V'ha'avim is gashma, our environment becomes very crude. We'll move on adovad, and naturally it becomes impossible. She'ein yishayach klal lifal azul, you can't influence somebody else. Why? You have no chayes. So the Rebbe Nayat said, this is Chov Gimel Iyad, the Hayem Yem. The toich of this Hayem Yem is that in order to be a Yid, you have to have a Korban Oila. A Korban Oila means a constant relationship with the Eibishter. This involvement in Gashmis is not a sin, but it takes away from your focus on Hashem. And the take of focus on Hashem brings to who knows what. We'll talk about this in Mitzvah Hashem later. So the male, the 8 is you got to do tshuva. You didn't do any Avedas. You're not connected to evil. But you have to reconnect to the Eibishter. And automatically you have a healthier perspective in all of the above. Let's read it inside. Okay, let's start again. Second line from the top of page Yud Beis. Shezeu lashon heter umut. This is the meaning of untied and permitted. Claim it. It's not tied down. She'eini kosev v'oser b'diach chitzim. It's not tied down and incarcerated in the hands of klipa, which is what the word osur means. Osur doesn't mean prohibited. Osur means tied down. When you engage in it, it ties you down. Heter means it's not tied down. Shalayuchalach said, because if it would be Isser, and you partake of an Isser, Rahman, it ties you down, it schleps you down. Heter doesn't tie you down. So therefore you can do tshuva by turning it around and using it in Avodas Hashem. Then the Alter Rebbe says that Akshareshi made an Isser Baguf, a person who indulges in Taivas Heter, it leaves a mark on his body even after he does tshuva. In the next page, Ches, when Alter Rebbe finishes talking about Avedas, he's going to start talking about non-Avedas that are non-mitzvahs, and they're marked, they leave in a goof. If you see chapter 8, if you know chapter 8, after he finishes talking about Avedas, it starts talking about Taivas Heter and Devorim B'Telim Beheter. People who indulge in permitted Taivas, it's not a sin, there's no punishment for it, but the holy it is, and Devorim B'Telim Beheter, permitted nonsense, permitted gossip, it's not a sin, but a mitzvah it's not. We're going to stop right here. Okay, so we'll break for a few minutes and then we're going to learn Hayem Yem. Thank you all for coming and good morning.
What are these with us?
Ruach, Godel, Anan, Chazak, Ve'esh, Misakachas. It's a pasuk in, look at the end of the previous page. At the end of chapter 6. So the Rebbe has a note on it. We talked about it. Basically, it's Akina Vatayv Vakovit.
So you say in English?
Jealousy, lust, and honor. Jealousy is the source of hate and violence. Lust is the source of all temptation. And honor, that things should look good on the outside, is the source of idol worship.